Okay, hi everybody. Going to keep reading from chapter 2 of Mercedes Lackey's um, One Good Night. Sorry, my friend here has decided to help me, so she may or may not be interrupting the whole time. Sorry, guys. Lay down, please. Chapter 2. The Queen paid little attention to her luncheon, concentrating instead on the notes from yesterday's conference as she ate. The morning had been occupied with purely Acadian concerns, but this afternoon she would be dealing with the merchant captains again. She hoped Solon's secretaries had managed to unearth more information, particularly on the foreign merchants. The men had been rather opaque and difficult to read, and had not been at all forthcoming with responses in the initial negotiations. Worse still, when she had made certain purposefully offhand remarks, there had been no reactions. The merchant captains were worse than professional tarot players. In her experience, most men let down their guards at least a little around a beautiful woman, but not these. She heard Solon's familiar footsteps, as always, accompanied by the soft rattling of his myriad charms and amulets, and did not bother to look up. A stack of papers appeared beside her notes. "I suggest you read this," said Solon, his soft and pleasant voice with a dry edge to it that told her there was something about this report that was of particular interest to him. Still without glancing up, she shoved the notes aside and took his stack. At once she knew this was not from one of his usual sources. The handwriting was different from that than any other report she had seen. Neat, precise, academic. Not an agent, then. A new secretary? If so, this was the most competent secretary Solon had found yet. She did not permit her eyebrows to rise, since such incautious expressions made wrinkles in the forehead, but she did nod approvingly. This person, whoever he was, not only duplicated everything she already knew, he provided her with a few facts and figures that were new. Nothing earth-shattering, but useful, especially the information on the foreigners who had been so opaque to her. "Well," she said when she had finished. She looked up at her chief adviser. Solon was not particularly tall, but he was well proportioned. Nothing like her muscular royal guards. But she happened to know that beneath his embroidered linen robe he had a very fit body. His face was a little too long for classic beauty, but it was very pleasing to the eye. His hands, graceful and immaculate and skilled, were the best features of a man who was widely considered one of the handsomest of her court. "I am impressed. Instead of merely competent help, you have conjured up someone quite clever. This will come in handy in my subsequent discussions. I hope you intend to keep him." "Her," Solon replied, unconcerned with wrinkles. He did raise one immaculately groomed eyebrow. "And I am not at all certain you will be as happy when you discover that this report was pressed upon me at breakfast this morning by your daughter." With great difficulty she kept her own eyebrows under control. True, her daughter was a scholar, too much of a scholar, really, but Cassiopeia had not expected so practical a turn in her scholarship. "Andromeda?" she replied, astonished. "All this? Was this what she was babbling to me about yesterday over breakfast?" She had long since gotten into the habit of turning a deaf ear to Andromeda's chatter. Perhaps she should have been paying more attention. Andromeda had evidently gotten beyond the peasant histories of fauns and centaurs, who were purely rustic creatures and of no practical importance. Now she was turning her mind to practical matters that had bearing on the governance of the kingdom. This could be either dangerous or useful. If useful, Cassiopeia had no compunction about using her. If dangerous, she had no compunction about finding a way to get rid of her. There were things that Cassiopeia did not want anyone aside from her and Solon to know. Least of all Andromeda. Quite possibly. Solon's long and very handsome face remained sober, his blue eyes dark with thought. "I know she always had her nose in a book, but I was under the impression that she was reading poetry or mythical tales or something equally girlish. I had no idea that she could put her finger on any fact or figure in the palace library, but this," he indicated the report, "seems to indicate that that is exactly what she can do." "This could be very useful," Cassiopeia replied, tapping one graceful finger on the table. "She isn't someone we would have to pay. She doesn't leave the palace. She is young and naive, and she doesn't talk to anyone who matters. And she should be easy enough to control. Much easier than some of your past secretaries." She smiled slightly. "Furthermore, she is eager to please me as a puppy. If I begin paying attention to her, she'll work 3 times as hard." "True, true." Solon ran a hand through his long black hair. "Her eagerness to please her mother will certainly be a powerful hold over her. Attention from you, more to the point, direction from you, and an indication that you are pleased with this turn in her studies, would probably be more effective than any reward I could devise for the others. But I am still concerned. I am not certain she will remain naive." "Then you would be wise to see that as she gains in knowledge, she also gains in understanding just what a ruler is." She allowed herself a slight smile. "And the difference between the ruler and the ruled." Ambition. That was what had gotten Cassiopeia here, and ambition, properly channeled and guided, might be a useful thing in her daughter. "And if she persists in her delusions?" Once again Solon raised an eyebrow. Cassiopeia dismissed his question with a flick of the wrist. "She is my daughter. If she is half as intelligent as you think, she will quickly come to the appropriate frame of mind." Andy tried not to be impatient as the afternoon wore on, but it was hard. Solon had not only taken her report, he had begun reading it as he walked away. Surely he would be at least a little impressed, for she had included some anecdotal information about some of the foreign merchant captains from copies of ship's log of Acadian merchants. Copies of all logs of domestic merchant ships were filed in the great library purely as a matter of historical record, although most contained little that was of historical interest. She had a notion that Solon's secretaries hadn't thought to look at those, and she had been right. From the slight layer of dust, it appeared they hadn't been looked at since they were put on the shelves. But it wasn't until dinner that she received a summons from one of her mother's ladies to attend the Queen. Since this was not an evening when the Queen usually held a more formal dinner with the court, it meant that Cassiopeia wanted to see her daughter alone, or relatively so. Although Andy had been ravenous, her throat closed and she lost her appetite. With her maid's help, she changed from her tunic into a gown, and waited, twisting her hands nervously in her lap while her maid put up her hair, and consented to adding a simple necklace of gold and garnet beads, something she almost never did. Wishing now that she had taken lemon juice to the ink stains on her fingers, she made her way out of her own wing, through the marble reception hall and great hall, and into the Queen's wing. At this hour, no one was in any of the public rooms except the guards, one stationed at each doorway. The rooms were lit only by token lamps, otherwise in shadow, but the fact that most of the palace was built from light-colored marbles made a little light go a long way. In winter these rooms could be awfully cold and draughty, but now, at the middle of summer, the cool air flowing through was pleasant. When she was a child she used to come here at night when she was too hot, and just sit quietly in a corner while the heat leached out of her body. 2 of the royal guard were on duty at the bronze doors into the Queen's private quarters. They let her in with a wink and a nod of encouragement, and she stepped onto the first of many thick, brightly patterned, imported silk carpets that had been her grandmother's dower when she came here as a foreign bride. The first chamber was a reception chamber for small audiences, softly lit by a few lightly perfumed oil lamps. It was empty of all except one of her mother's maids. As ever with any of the Queen's servants, the girl was flawlessly groomed, her simple linen gown spotless, not a hair out of place. Like most natives of Ethnos, she was dark-haired and dark-eyed. Many beautiful women preferred that their servants be plain. Queen Cassiopeia had always insisted on physical attractiveness in those who waited on her, and this maid was no exception to that rule. "Please follow me, Princess," the maid said, without the faintly contemptuous tone her mother's maids usually used when they saw her. Evidently this time her appearance passed inspection. With a nod, Andy obeyed, moving through several more chambers, also barely lit, until they came to the lesser dining chamber. This one, of marble, beautifully ornamented with jewel-toned mosaic wall murals made of millions of bits of glass, depicting enormous baskets of flowers and fruit, held one large table. The Queen sat at the head of it. To her left was Solon, and to her right an empty chair. Farther down the table sat 3 of her more favored ladies. Andy knew 2 of them by name. These 2 were young members of the Queen's regular court, while the stranger was middle-aged or older. The young ones were dressed in a less elaborate version of the Queen's gown, with form-fitting bodices, low necklines, full skirts, and tiny sleeves that left most of the arms bare. The Queen's gown was a pale blue silk with festoons of heavy lace, which suited her blonde beauty. The young lady to the right, raven-haired and olive-skinned, wore cream color with a silk fringe, while the one to the left, also raven-haired but with a translucent complexion, wore pink with garlands of tiny ribbon rosettes. The older woman wore a somber gown of dark ochre with ornaments of jet and longer sleeves that covered her arms to the wrist. "Andromeda, please join us," Cassiopeia said, with a slight smile that indicated her favor. She turned to look down at the table at one of the three ladies, the one in cream. "Curia, do you think you could manage something more attractive for those lenses than a wire frame?" "Without a doubt, Majesty," replied the lady, whose hobby was jewelry design, and whose talent for it was so formidable that the Queen would have no one else design for her. "The magician is a fine fellow, but his concern is function, not form." She tilted her head to the side, and one attractive raven curl brushed her cheek. "As the princess is young, and her tastes are austere, I believe that a carefully wrought frame of white gold will suit her personality as well as her face best. And I believe that I will ask him to construct larger lenses." "Larger? Surely not," Cassiopeia objected. But Lady Curia smiled. "Majesty, larger lenses will allow one to see the princess's eyes more properly. Instead of being obscured, nearly eclipsed by small lenses, they will be enhanced. A little kohl, some malachite on her lids, and one will see the eyes first, and not the lenses. The oculars will become secondary to her face, not the first thing one sees." Cassiopeia's blue eyes warmed slightly with approval. "I bow to your singular ability, Lady Curia." As the Queen spoke, Andy had gingerly taken the empty seat at the Queen's right, clasping her hands in her lap. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her mother was not only acknowledging her oculars, she was going out of her way to make them attractive. Larger lenses? I'll be able to see so much better. "Now, Andromeda," the Queen said, turning to Andy, "it is time to speak of why I asked you to dine with us this evening. Solon gave me your report over luncheon, and I am very pleased. It was useful to me this afternoon. I was under the impression that you were wasting your time with purely scholastic interests. I was favorably impressed to see that you have, in fact, been turning your intellect and talents to practical matters." Andy couldn't help herself. She beamed. "Oh, your Majesty, I hoped I could do something to help. I hoped that Advisor Solon would see that I know that a princess is not free to choose her own interests, not like ordinary people are." She decided to press her case while her mother was still looking interested. "I'm good at finding things out from books and records, and I think I can be useful to you. Please, your Majesty, I want to be useful. I want responsibilities." "And you shall have them, child," the Queen interrupted with a throaty chuckle. "Tell her, Solon." The advisor coughed slightly. "Your report provided both an example of what you can do and a reminder to us that, despite your outward appearance, which is that of a much younger person than your true age, you are not a child any longer. The fact that you wish responsibilities speaks well of your maturity, and the Queen has determined that we have been remiss in allowing your appearance to mislead us." She blushed at his description of her. Well, so she was slight and flat-chested, and she didn't like to fuss over gowns the way the Queen's ladies did. Did he have to dwell on that? But he wasn't finished, and her flush faded. "So from today you are to provide exactly the kind of informational analysis to us, that is, the Queen and I, that you provided in this report, and to signal the change in your status and responsibilities, there will be some significant changes in your household. Your governess will be dismissed. You clearly have no more need of such persons. If you determine you need a tutor in some subject, another language perhaps, you will have the wherewithal to engage one yourself and dismiss him when you are through with him. You will have a secretary of your own appointed to serve in your researches. Your personal staff will be augmented. Lady Charis will become your lady of the wardrobe, designing your clothing in accordance with both your personal taste and the needs of your new position." The second of the two ladies present nodded at Andy in a friendly fashion. "The austere style suits you, Princess," Lady Charis said, and Andy suppressed a sigh of relief. Columnar gowns will make you appear taller, and a very simple Gordian knot hairstyle will suit your face. I will simply be making certain that any time you make a public appearance, you are not left to the dubious choices of an ordinary maidservant, and that your gowns will be kept in immaculate condition." She hoped that Lady Cheris would keep her promise of simple gowns. She didn't think she could bear to be laced into the things her mother wore as a matter of course. "Your 6 current guards will be retired," Solon continued. This time it was a surge of dismay that Andy suppressed. Not that she hadn't been expecting just this for some time, but it was horrible to hear it voiced aloud, and so casually. "They are good and faithful servants, and long overdue for retirement. They were fine for a child, but you will need young, strong warriors who will actually provide a visual deterrent to attack. You will have new guards appointed, signaling your new importance to Her Majesty, and they will wear your own colors of—" He looked at Lady Cheris. "Silver and green," Cheris said promptly. Another relief. Those were colors she could live with. The Queen nodded her approval. Her own colors were wine and silver. "Yes, silver and green. Your household servants will be augmented, and you will have your own household steward appointed to you so that you need no longer concern yourself with the day-to-day trivia of your household." He smiled, his expression not actually reaching his eyes, but then it never did. "You will no longer need to go anywhere that you do not wish to if you are busy. From now on, whatever you want or need can and should be brought to you, whether it be a pen or a person." "As is appropriate to an adult princess," the Queen said approvingly. "Which leads me to Lady Thalia, who will be your household steward." The third lady nodded. Unlike the other two, she was gowned less for fashion and more for practicality. She did not appear to have been sewn into her gown like the others. The Queen continued. "She has served us as the steward of one of our estates for many years now, and I am very satisfied with her competence." "The Queen is too kind," the lady murmured. Andy didn't see anything in the woman's expression to cause misgivings, and her next words and faint smile reassured the princess. "As the princess is not the sort given to extravagance, nor is she spendthrift and frivolous, I anticipate no difficulty in managing her household." "You are more likely to have to join with me in urging the princess to acquire a wardrobe commensurate with her rank and status than to have to curb her passion for gowns and jewels," Lady Cheris laughed. "I fear I have been present at one or two of the discussions with her dressmaker, if you will recall, Majesty." The Queen sighed. "But, Mother, linen is so much more practical than silk. Stains bleach right out and it wears so much longer," she quoted with a faint air of mockery, and Andy winced. "She has a point, Majesty," Solon said unexpectedly, with a glance down at his own linen robes. Not that his elegant clothing had much in common with Andy's. Especially for a young person who was hard on her clothing. As a young student myself, I chose black linen exclusively, not as an affectation, but because ink did not show. Andy felt an unexpected urge of sympathy at that revelation, and she cast a quick, grateful smile at him. "Indeed, she does, when it comes to everyday wear, particularly for someone who will be digging about amongst dusty books for most of the day," Lady Cheris agreed. "Tunics and divided skirts of linen are quite suitable for such a duty, and practical, although I must insist that you are more than old enough to refrain from bare-legged scrambles about from here on, Princess." Again Andy flushed what she knew must be crimson. Her stomach kept turning over and over, the longer this interview went on. Pleasure that was half pain, followed by embarrassment that made her want to sink into the floor. Good things were followed by blows, so quickly she hadn't had time to recover before another hit her. "However, Princess," Lady Cheris continued, "your new responsibilities will include more court appearances, as well as the occasional attendance at conference and audience, and your gowns will occasionally need to reflect your status. Silk there will be, and jewels, and other ornaments you would rather do without. You must look the part of a princess when the Queen requires it. Think of it as armor. You are the kind of guard to the dignity of nation and lineage, and you must wear the armor for that duty." "On other occasions, however," Solon added, "we will wish for you, although you will be attending similar functions, to blend with the other secretaries and not stand out." He raised an eyebrow, and she flushed, realizing that this meant they were taking her very seriously indeed. If there is no need for the princess to be present, then it should not be obvious that the princess is indeed in attendance. My beauty has consistently caused foreign princes and diplomats to underestimate my intelligence, Andromeda, the queen said unexpectedly, as Solon nodded. It is a tool I have learned to use, and use well. That is my armor. If they look upon me, bejeweled and draped in costly fabric, and assume that is all I care for, then that is all to the good. You have not inherited my beauty, more's the pity, but you have in your very ordinariness another sort of armor. You can make yourself overlooked and ignored, which is just as effective as being underestimated. I do not say these things to hurt you, child, but to educate you. The time for games and running about on cliff steps is gone. You wish to be treated as an adult, and given responsibilities. I am doing so, and granting you the candor I give Solon. Andy looked down at the hands twisting nervously in her lap. Maybe her mother didn't intend to hurt her feelings, but they were hurt all the same. I'm not that ugly, am I? Or no, she didn't say ugly, just forgettable. Now, I believe we have said everything we need to, the Queen concluded brightly. Tomorrow the next phase of your life will begin, and tonight we will have dinner. She touched her knife to her goblet, making it ring, and suddenly the room was full of servants, bustling everywhere, with food that Andy barely touched and certainly couldn't taste. There was no more serious talk. The Queen and her ladies and even Solon made light chatter that went right over Andy's head, seeing she didn't know half the people they were talking about. She did drink a little too much of the wine, though. Her mouth was so dry, the lamps were so bright, and she kept flushing for no real reason, except an ongoing case of acute embarrassment, and the only thing to drink was the wine, at least until the dessert course came and she was able to cool her flushes with sherbet. She knew she was tipsy because she got light-headed, and after that she said even less and moved with great care. A fine thing it would be for her to spoil the impression she had made by getting drunk. Finally, after the dessert, she snatched at the opportunity to ask the Queen's permission to leave. Cassiopeia was deep in conversation with Lady Charisse at this point, and simply waved a hand at her daughter. Feeling as if she was trying to balance on the edge of a cliff, Andy got up slowly, and just as slowly sketched a brief curtsy and walked out, into the shadowed rooms beyond. The royal guards at the Queen's door stood like a pair of statues. She murmured a quiet good night to them, and they nodded back. While she was within sight of them, she did her best to walk steadily, but once on her own she felt like her steps wavering a little, and she didn't bother to correct them until she came in sight of the guards on her wing. The two guards on her own door saluted her, and she nodded back, but neither she nor they spoke. The cool breeze felt wonderful on her hot forehead, and it woke her up a bit, but she didn't feel safe until the doors to her own wing closed behind her, and she was able to put her back against them, closing her eyes and waiting for the dizziness to pass. Princess? She opened her eyes. One of her faithful 6, Mara, was standing beside the door to the next chamber, holding a lantern and peering through the darkness at her. I'm afraid I had a little too much wine and not nearly enough dinner, Mara, she said, her tongue feeling unnaturally thick. Thought as much. Come along, dear, the guard said in a motherly fashion, coming to take her arm and guide her to the bedchamber. I knew you were on edge about this business you wrote up for old Solon. It seems to have done the trick, rumor says, and you're coming up in the world, I hear. I think I might have a glass or two too many if I'd been sitting in your chair, having all that thrown at me. She turned astonished eyes to the graying old warrior woman. You mean you already know? She had been dreading the thought of trying to figure out how to tell them. Her head had been buzzing with the problem all during the strange dinner, but now... Of course, Mara laughed. You can't keep anything secret from the guard here in the palace. Oh, we'll miss you like blazes, my darling girl, but we all should have been retired years ago, and would have if we hadn't been worried about leaving you friendless with those hateful bitches Her Majesty has set as your governesses. She's going. That she was able to say with satisfaction. Mara laughed. She's gone. Sent packing while you were at dinner. No, we won't have to worry about you any more. You'll be the one in charge here, not them. You can pick your own people. And we've heard Lady Thalia's all right. It's about time you got a real household of your very own, and it's not as if you need us, old grey dogs that we are. "But I do need you," she wailed, and to her own horror burst into half-drunk tears. The Queen and Solon lingered over their wine once the other ladies had retired. Not that there was even a hint of impropriety. She had ordered the outer doors to the great hall be opened, to let the breeze blow through, and her two guards could see them both, if not hear them. Such painstaking caution was how she had kept her relationship with Solon unattainted by speculation all these years. Of course, no one knew of the other ways Solon could come to her chamber, once the last of her maids had been dismissed. They thought all of his amulets and charms were the signs of superstition and a timorous nature. If they only knew. "That went well, I thought," she said, idly turning her wineglass around and around. "I am cautiously optimistic," Solon replied, steepling his hands on the table. "The Princess is pitiably eager to please you. So long as we can keep her gaze directed only at what we want her to see, this may work out very well. Certainly giving her charge over her own household will resonate well with the people, and it won't hurt to trot her out for their inspection from time to time. Her physical immaturity will work on your behalf. No one would believe she's older than 14, especially not at a distance. That will eliminate those pesky rumors that you've been keeping her locked up because she's feeble-minded." "She'll hate that," the Queen replied with a chuckle, "and it will certainly cure her of wanting to put herself forward in any way. I am concerned about possible marriage offers, however," Solon continued with a sharp glance at her. "Apparent immaturity will be no drawback there." This time the Queen's throaty laugh sounded like a cat's purr. "And therein lies the genius of assigning Lady Charis to her wardrobe. Lady Charis is much enamored of the styles from her cousin's land of Lytheria, the ones that emphasize waif-like proportions and pale skin. Obviously none of us is suited to the style, and none of us wishes to look like draped poles or famine victims, but Andromeda is the perfect model for such garments. Between Kyria's plan to give her oculars that will make her look like an owl, and Charis' Lytherian gowns in colors that will make her look like a ghost, any ambassador that comes sniffing about will think the child is about to fade away from consumption." She lowered her lids in satisfaction at his look of surprise. "I've told you 100 times, if I've told you once, Solon, that fashion is a weapon, and you never believe me." He spread his hands wide. "Once again, you leave me dazzled." "Once again, I demonstrate that our abilities are complementary," she replied, sipping her wine. "On the whole, this evening has been entirely satisfactory." "Should I put her to a task?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not yet. She'll be busy with the setting up of her new household. Charis will appear first thing with fabric and seamstresses. She'll feel she has to know everything about her household, even though Thalia is perfectly capable of making it all run seamlessly and invisibly. And while I am at it, I believe I will send over some of the furnishings from the Dowager Queen's household that have been in storage, to replace everything that dates from Andromeda's childhood. This will serve two functions. Having so much to think about will prevent her from recalling all the servants and guards I am going to replace until it is too late to bring them back, and organizing her rooms will keep her a little unsettled." She licked her lips. "I want her unsettled. I never want her to be comfortable or confident. I want her always to be a little unbalanced. While she is off balance, she will not think to look much beyond what she is told to look for. Ambition, in moderation. I want her ambition to go no further than to please me. I want her controlled." "I think that can be arranged, Majesty," Solon replied dryly. "I am nothing if not an expert at keeping people unsettled." "So you are," she purred, and flicked a curl back over her shoulder with one finger. "So you are." Ladies and gentlemen, we are not all the way through chapter 2, but this video is hitting about 30 minutes now, and I've got about 12 pages left. So we're gonna, So we're gonna go ahead and stop right there, and I will pick up the rest of chapter 2 in a bit. Okay, bye-bye.